from stormy Midwest. I am so glad the airstrikes were called off, even though it's like on and off and on and off and on and off. I was on the phone with someone yesterday and we talked about the book Atomic Habits. I browsed a little bit of it yesterday. Usually I'm a little wary of self-help books nowadays, but yeah, like this book is pretty interesting because he really, James, right? Mr. James really goes into the whole dopamine aspect of why people make certain decisions. And he keeps using the example of when the gambler places their bet, that is when the dopamine increases, not when the gambler wins money. So you can think of the current leadership is experiencing enormous surges of dopamine while they're announcing, we're gonna F these people over, we're gonna F those people over. And then they don't do it because Trump probably has read James' book. Anyways, ordinary people can also access their source of joy by getting some Middle Eastern sweets. So a very lovely lady, Ms. Nano, has a cafe and she sells Middle Eastern sweets. And in a very interesting twist of events, this store may be bought by a new owner who will change the name from Nano to his relative's name. We're not sure, but we'll see in July what happens. Because of the market turbulences, it may or may not happen. So change is always occurring, as one Chinese uncle told his son. Son, change is the only constant in life. I overheard that, but it's a good quote. So we continue to read from Street Politics after you get your sweets or your Luigi bubbly soda. I got this yesterday at the store. Ooh, it's overflowing. One of my Afghani American friends has a relative who liked one of my videos, and one of his posts was a can of Sprite and fries. Because I think he still lives in Afghanistan, so he's a genius. If you ever need some help, have some fries and Sprite. Okay. Street politics. For the poor, informality served both as a means of coping and of livelihood and as an end in itself. In the settlements, the poor evaded the institutions of the state and governed their own lives, tacitly rejecting bureaucracy, taxation, and the discipline of time and the regulation of space. For instance, over 80% of Islam Shahar's inhabitants did not see any role for the municipality in regulating their community, and in the surrounding settlements, over half of the people avoided the state bureaucracy, instead extending kinship through intercommunal marriages served to expand cooperation and mutual responsibility. One of the advantages of living here, said a resident of Aliabad, Khazane, is that I am next to my village fellows, Hamshahri, and since my work requires me to travel a lot, I always feel relieved that my family is secure among them. Others felt happy that everyone is related here and they help each other out. The poor contested the dominant spatial policies and perceptions. They built their dwellings according to their needs, taste, and resources, like raising domestic animals, avoiding police control concerning how to appear or assemble in public, and when to pay bills and return loans. For instance, when relocated to the apartments of Shahrak-e-Sush, squatters of the Gaud settlements built courtyards around their apartments by making the alleyways private domain and erecting a wall or fence around their apartments. A number of them returned to their old squatter dwellings. Some of the settlers of Pol-e-Mudiriyat and Halab Sheher of Tehran, Pars, who had been given homes and new apartments, eventually moved and settled in other squatter settlements. The relocation project of South Tehran, before the revolution, had similar problems. Many squatters who had been relocated into the government housing either sold or rented out those homes and moved back into shacks. In Bandar Abbas, the 2,500 unit government housing turned after a while into a spontaneous settlement, primarily because such government housing patterns did not meet the needs of the poor. Yet integrating these communities was crucial for the Islamic State. The populist regime could hardly tolerate diversity, let alone autonomy. It was adamant about molding an obedient Islamic ummah, a concept totally in contrast with that of the squatter settlements, which some officials viewed as bastions of lawlessness, deviance, and potential dissent and/or drug trade. Some marginal communities in Tehran were granted official recognition when the government was forced to change the administrative boundaries of the city. Integration was not so simple. Since it could foster further migration, it would also require massive facilities as well as reorganization. Once the official recognition for settlers of Islam Sheher was achieved, new communities sprang up around the settlement in Akbarabad and Sultanabad through the illegal construction of agricultural and al-Kaf lands. Al-Kaf is the mosque-endorsed tax-free lands that are also prevalent in South Asia. Super huge problem. If you search WAQF, it's a Twitter debate. It was partly these constraints that would push the authorities to resort to forced eviction and demolition of unlawful dwellings. So we get to the exciting part of demolishing communities. Hashtag Minecraft. Squatters suffered intermittent attacks through the 1980s and 1990s. The frequency of assaults shifted depending on national political conditions, the policies of particular mayors, and reaction of the squatters. They seemed haphazard and unsystematic in the early phase, with the Pastaran mainly in charge of the order. The pressure increased after the summer of 1981 following a widespread government crackdown on the opposition. From 1984 on, demolition work became systematic. In July 1984, the Tehran municipality built a 300-man task force composed of the army and municipality agents who patrolled the streets to catch violations before they actually occurred. The task force was made up of 76 units who covered mainly the peripheral areas of South and Northwest Tehran around the clock in 3 shifts. By September 1985, the task force increased to 1,000 men. Numerous communities were attacked throughout the 1980s, often by paramilitary escorted by trucks and bulldozers. The earliest reports attempts in Tehran included those in Dashtak, Shahrak, Mamazan, Shahrak-e-Kiam, Shahrak-e-Karo, and there's like a long list. Squatters in provincial cities such as Mashhad, Tabriz, Isfahan, etc. did not remain immune from these eviction attempts. While selected homes were destroyed, settlements were under constant surveillance by the vigilant Pastaran and special task forces, who drove around in military jeeps to make sure no new shacks were put up and none of the existing ones were consolidated. The total number of homes and business places destroyed is unknown, but a report quoting the municipality of Tehran suggested that during summer 1992 alone, some 2,000 unlawful homes and business places were torn down. In an earlier well-known incident in Kak-e-Safed in Tehran, east of the capital city, where illegal housing grew rapidly after the revolution, 1,000 army soldiers encircled the settlement from the north on January 1980, intending to level the community once and for all. At 4 a.m., they halted traffic in the area. The operation began at 7 a.m. By the end of the day, 30 homes had been destroyed and more than 40 people detained. The day after, when I went there, the scattered debris pointed to what had happened, recalled an eyewitness and activist. It was clear that people had not slept through the night. They had anticipated the assault. Women with sleepy eyes were busy taking their belongings out of the rubble while swearing at the regime, especially the municipality and the Pastaran. It was also obvious that the security forces had been unable to destroy them all. People had resisted. Resistance against destruction of the squatter areas was confirmed repeatedly by authorities. Corruption among government agents made things even harder. A few years ago, in 1990, the municipality sent its agents to evict us from here. They came, got some money, and left. The intermittent offenses often entailed bloody confrontations and street unrest. On many occasions, the assaults were offset by women and children refusing to leave their dwellings and by others laying themselves down in front of the bulldozers. One of the demonstrations chanted, "We built homes with our blood and they destroy them so easily." They marched on to convey their anger at the municipality office. The day after, when the municipality trucks turned to collect the debris, the residents attacked them, inflicting heavy damages. A new march was organized, bringing some 400 people to the municipality office once again. The demonstrators staged a sit-in and demanded that they be compensated for the damages to their homes. 3 members of the neighborhood council began negotiating with the authorities, agreeing on the plan to identify the opportunist developers from the real homeless who deserve to keep their homes. This is a constant debate in Asia where people see beggars and their first reaction is, are they really destitute or is this just an act? And for me, I mean, even if they're acting, they deserve something, right? Because acting requires effort. It's like, why don't you give me the money? Noisy resistance of this sort made the government try different tactics, including buying off certain residents and divide and rule tactics, as is evident in the case of Sheher. The government's failed attempt to evict over 700 households failed despite the destruction of some 100 homes in 1990. When its compensation offer was collectively rejected by the squatters, the municipality divided the latter by persuading a group of them to accept the offer, and those people worked for the government, the rats. It then began to put pressure on the rest to comply, while threatening to cut off water and electricity and destroy shacks. By December 1992, it succeeded in evicting about 80% of the squatters in exchange for money in exchange for payments. The squatters of Mudiriyat in Tehran, however, rejected a similar deal in 1987, arguing that the compensation offer was not sufficient to purchase new homes. But to offset police provocation, they consciously prevented newcomers from joining the settlement. The prevalent spirit immediately after the revolution contributed to the militancy of the squatters in defending their gains. The urban riots some 10 years later demonstrate the continuing collective passion with which the squatter defended their communities. During 1991 and 1992, 5 major incidents of unrest took place in Tehran, Shiraz, Mashhad, Arak, and Khorramabad, in addition to frequent minor clashes in many urban centers. In August 1991, the squatters of Bagherabad, a district in South Tehran, rioted against the municipality agents who had begun demolishing their shacks. These protesters threw stones at the police and set cars on fire. The Shiraz riots came less than 1 year later, when some 300 disabled war veterans staged protests against the mismanagement of funds at the state-run Foundation of the Dispossessed. They were immediately joined by squatters protesting their forced eviction from their illegally built homes. The protesters went on a rampage of looting, burning city buses, banks, and police stations. During this one-day riot, 2 protesters and 6 police were killed, many injured, and 300 arrested. 4 were executed by the Iranian government. More widespread riots occurred in the industrial city of Arak, 240 kilometers southwest of Tehran, which lasted for 2 days and resulted in hundreds of arrests and detentions. The riots broke out in May 1992 when a dump truck being chased by a municipality pickup hit and killed a young boy. Neighbors began to set fire on the pickup. The following day, up to 3,000 people marched in the city chanting, "Down with the mayor," setting fire to several bank branches and 3 municipality buildings. The city remained under martial law for several days. The most dramatic events took place in Mashhad, a holy city of 3 million people close to the Afghanistan border. Mashhad's disturbances on May 30th, 1992 began in a squatter area, Koi-e-Tolab, where the municipality had refused to grant construction permits to the illegally built dwellings. When local representatives returned home from the municipality office where they made their requests, they encountered bands of squads and security forces with trucks and bulldozers who had come to destroy the unlicensed homes. Many inhabitants resisted by assaulting the officers. Others refused to leave their dwellings. A temporary lull in the school children returned from their schools. The crowd grew even larger, and in the ensuing clashes with the security forces, 2 young boys were shot and killed. The indignant rioters then went on an orgy of looting and arson, burning the city hall, the main library, several police stations. By the evening, the city was in the hands of the rioters, with the police and Islamic guards standing back and letting the crowd go on with it. The army could not quiet the city, so the government sent in units of voluntary militia Basij in the hope that they could calm the crowd. Among the crowd were 8 masked gunmen who led the looting and attacks on the government buildings. In the end, the riot left over 100 buildings and stores destroyed and 35 cars burned, with an estimated total damage of 10 billion Iranian currency of the time. Over 300 people were arrested. 6 police officers were killed. 4 rioters were hanged. Officials blamed the religious hardliners ousted from the parliament, foreigners, opportunists, and the mujahideen for the unrest, because Mashhad is somewhere else, not Tehran. While it is likely that some professional activists took place in the incident, it seemed evident that squatters' discontent lay at the core of the unrest. Following each attack, things seemed to go back to more normality before long. In the Kak-Isafed settlement, soon after the departure of the demolition agents, people began to rebuild their homes once again. Women helped their husbands in rebuilding their dwellings, and I pursued my work on a self-help plumbing project to bring running water to the community. Despite the intensity of these riots, they were not extraordinary political events. Rather, they were the logical corollary to the politics of the squatter poor in their everyday lives. This is the author Asif Bayat speaking his opinion, because he needs to intellectualize all these very gruesome events as an academic. Given the resistance of the poor, it seems that the limited available options made a de facto tolerance of the informal communities an undeclared state policy, leaving the task of deterrence to nature. A recent method employed by the municipality of Tehran is the forestation of vacant lands around the city as a way to halt the creeping advance of the squatters. Wonder where they got that from. This measure represents the quiet response of the state to the quiet encroachment of the homeless. Indeed, this policy, along with forceful eviction and economic exclusion, has to a large extent succeeded. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Tehran experienced outmigration. However, the people driven from one spot are likely to end up settling in a different, more distant place. Not surprisingly, informal communities spread at an unprecedented rate just outside their boundaries by turning hundreds of nearby villages into low-income urban settlements. The silent movement of the poor in the backstreets of their insecure communities is likely to continue. But if and when the captured gains are threatened, the silent movement of the backstreets is likely to turn into open and audible street action. So that was the end of the squatter chapter. And next time we will read Workless Revolutionaries, the Movement of the Unemployed. And then the weekend I'll be busy, so I won't be streaming because we have a Drikun Kagyu Molam in Chicago. If you're there, say hi. I will be in Chicago this weekend, so no streaming. But before then, we'll be reading the next chapter, Movement of the Unemployed.